There's a lot of innovations in equipment for setting up a deer camp. There's also innovations for deer hunting, gimmicks, gadgets, and some of these can be really practical, like a deer decoy, but there are some tricks you should know about using them. This buck chases small does because they're close and not running away. Now he turns his attention towards the larger doe, again because she's close, but when she scoots off, he sniffs the ground, trying to determine if any of these does are in heat. Now his first try, though, is visual. He sees the doe standing still, which is a clue that she might be in heat. Vision is the most important sense to a deer. That's why deer decoys work. This is a plastic decoy made by Flambeau, one of the first commercial deer decoys on the market. We used it successfully in Iron County and in Clare to attract bucks and does that came in from all directions when they saw it. Now here was a typical response from a doe, deliberately walking towards the decoy, somewhat alarmed but curious. And the thing we always noticed was how much time the live deer spent looking in the direction the decoy appeared to look. The ears and the nose of the decoy were obviously recognizable shapes to the live deer, but because the decoy didn't move, the live deer wondered what was up. It seemed to make the live deer a little uneasy. Our first 2 years of using decoys, we found out they worked with that one little hitch that does in particular seemed to be bothered by the fact that the decoy was looking somewhere, but there was nothing to look at. So we talked to the people at the Featherflex company. Featherflex makes the most lightweight deer decoy you can imagine. It doesn't even weigh a pound. It rolls up. Don't be bothered by the blaze orange. Their research shows that the deer think this is white. Small antlers on this buck do not intimidate other bucks. I've set the ears down on this one, so the buck looks like it's maybe looking for a scrap. It might attract another buck. This decoy you can set out. If you're only using one, I'd recommend a doe decoy and not a buck, because a doe will attract virtually any buck and attract does. The key to a multiple decoy setup, which seems to solve this problem of what is the decoy looking at, this buck looks like it's looking at this doe. This doe has its ears up, looks alert, looks receptive. That's the way you want it. And I've also added a turkey decoy over here, which is another option. You can put a turkey decoy out so it looks like these decoys are looking at each other. That will focus the attention of the other deer. You can also use a grunt call, which seems to reassure deer that are coming into a decoy. I know it sounds elaborate, I know it sounds crazy, but these decoys, even without legs, work. Now, I don't know where this video was taken. It was provided by the people who make the Featherflex decoy, but it shows some interesting behavior of whitetail deer, especially large bucks, when they encounter decoys. Now, you can draw your own conclusions from what you see, but I'll give you my impression of what's going on based on my experiences with deer and deer decoys. Now, what you're seeing is the initial curiosity of a buck, keying in on the deer's head, ears, and antlers. He approaches from the rear, nudges, then begins attacking that phony buck. Within 40 seconds, the attack becomes serious. The live buck licks its nose, trying to pick up scent from the decoy. But there's no live deer scent, and the manufactured foam odor is not something that a deer fears, so it continues attacking. Now, deer fights usually attract other large breeding bucks, not small ones, because other bucks have learned that there's usually a doe in heat nearby, and that's what the spectator bucks are looking for. Now, here's another thing that fascinates me. Why the buck attacks tree branches as well as the decoy? Maybe branches and antlers and fighting relate to the rubbing behavior. You'd think that the live buck would know the decoy is a hoax, but it still attacks that upside-down piece of foam. I think it still recognizes the shape of the head and ears, and that's what keeps the buck going. Now, this looks comical to me, but that buck isn't playing. It's serious. Now it smells and licks the nose of the doe decoy. Now, that's a visually stimulated behavior. Remember the tip about setting decoys so they're looking at each other? Well, this seems to work. The bucks and does seem more intensely interested and focused on the pair of decoys, much more so than my experiences with one decoy that looks off into nowhere. Now, this entire attack lasts over 3 minutes, so it wasn't quick and it wasn't gentle. But get ready because this buck isn't done. Now here's something I've never seen before. What do you make of it? It's logical that when deer fight, they also bite, but I just never thought of deer reacting that way. You'll hear the hunter in the tree blowing a grunt call periodically. According to the Featherflex people, the sound of a grunt call during these encounters seems to keep the live deer focused even more. And as commonly happens around a deer fight, another buck, about the same size or bigger, comes in. But the original buck continues with his attacks. Can you believe this? Fatal antler attacks, twisting, knocking the head and neck, and then attacking the head. Now, that's what makes me think that live deer key in on the head and ears. That's the most important part of a decoy. I don't think a buck would react this aggressively to a hard plastic decoy, but this foam apparently has a flesh-like texture. Now, deer do smell and lick each other when they meet, but here's something really weird. The doe acts like she's greeting this bedded buck, but loses her cool and begins nibbling the antler. Very, very weird. One thing this video proves is that deer aren't very smart, not nearly as smart as hunters and nature films and cartoons make deer out to be. Now notice this live buck's ears, they're down. That's an aggressive signal. The buck is coming in with a hostile attitude. He's keyed in on the decoy, on its head. He circles and comes around it again. This is when the archer in the tree decides to take a shot, aiming for the heart. Now how does a deer react to a razor-sharp arrow? Watch. The buck trots off. The arrow is passed through its heart in a fraction of a second. Now, typically, an arrowed buck will cover about 100 yards in the next 8 or 10 seconds, quickly becoming dizzy and expiring. Well, to my way of thinking, a well-placed shot with an arrow doesn't jolt the deer. In fact, it happens so fast that I doubt the deer feels anything except dizziness. In the hands of a competent archer, a razor-sharp broadhead can dispatch a deer cleanly and humanely. We give wild creatures far too much credit for being smart. They're not smart, but they are wary. But they can be fooled rather easily. It appears that both the decoy and the live deer, in different ways, have lost their heads.